What is going on, everybody? My name is Smitty. You're watching the Fantasy Football Show. On this episode of the Fantasy Football Show, I'm breaking down two players, Cam Akers and Ceedee Lamb, but I'm going to break it down from a very, very unique perspective, a perspective of psychology, specifically relating to something we call sunk cost fallacy. What is it?
Sunk cost fallacy.
What it means is that we as people behave in weird ways, and one way is when we remain committed to a decision we make where the decision's wrong. We know the alternative is better, but we continue to go down the wrong path for a couple different reasons, and I'll explain. This relates to people in the business world who keep sinking bad money into a bad project, and they keep investing in it because you have too much invested in something. You just continue to buy into it. You don't want what you spent to go to waste, so you throw more good money at a bad problem, not leaving a relationship that's clearly unhealthy. You've got too much invested. You keep going down the path. I've invested way too much. Why stop now? Or everything I've put into it is a waste. So I'll just keep throwing stuff at it. I'll keep throwing myself into it. That's this fallacy, your sunk cost fallacy. You sunk way too much investment in, remaining in a grocery line that is clearly not going anywhere, but you convince yourself to keep waiting in the line because you've already invested 15 minutes in that line. This can all be applied to fantasy football. But what do you mean, Smitty? How does this apply to fantasy football? Pretty easy, Bob. Think about this as it relates to a player like Cordero Patterson or a rebound of Deebo Samuel. It became evident at some point during the year that they were going to continue to ball out. And while people came into 2021 with a preconceived notion that Deebo was going to get hurt, Deebo couldn't remain a top 1 to 5 wide receiver. He just couldn't do it. Continuing down that path in a way is similar to this fallacy because you've already invested a lot of energy in doubting him. You don't want to be wrong. It's easier to say, you know what, he's eventually going to break and then I'm going to be okay. I won't have been wrong in the end if he fails. You're rooting for Deebo to fail. You're rooting for Cordero Patterson to be a 3-week wonder. You continue to go down the wrong path because you've already invested in that journey. And you didn't invest in the proper journey, and you don't want to admit it, so you continue to doubt and go down the wrong avenue. This is a very important topic because I think we're all a potential victim to this with our own thinking. And if we can recognize when to back away from supporting a stance we might have when it's clearly being proven wrong, it can help us craft our game a lot better. We can become very good at changing directions, adjusting and adapting, which makes you a really good owner. To be able to say, you know what, I was wrong weeks 1 through 4, I'm buying in now. Or to say, hey, I've been doubting this guy all January through July. He looks good here in August. I'm going to change my mind. I'm going to invest in him. I'm going to be bigger than that and go, I don't care if I'm late to the party. I believe in this player now. It's important to be open-minded to this because it really can make the difference in taking your game from good to great if you're able to adjust and adapt properly and not stick to your guns when you're not right. When you feel in your gut you're not right. We all suffer from this, and there's no shame in changing your mind. I change my mind all the time, and I try and be really, really honest about it, but even I sometimes might dig my heels in because I've created so much content about not liking this player or liking this player. It could go either way. Supporting a player when they're not likely gonna deliver, or doubting a player when they're clearly going to probably deliver. I fall victim to this. We all do. It's okay to admit it, but it's important to try and correct it and be better. You can be better. I can be better. This will make us better, both of us, if we can identify it. The tricky part is identifying when this is taking place, or when you really do have a gut instinct that a player is gonna not continue to do well, or that people are gonna be ultimately wrong about the player. We'll talk about a player that, in fairness, probably falls in this category for me, and we'll evaluate if I'm wrong on it. And I'll try and be completely honest with this process and say, hey, am I falling victim to this fallacy with this player? And the player's name is Cam Akers. We'll talk about him right now. Am I wrong about Cam? I've been very critical about him coming back early, and he clearly looked great in the wild card game where they utilized him a ton and he was explosive and he did look quick. Am I wrong with Cam Akers when I apply caution to drafting and investing in him in 2022? Am I trying to go down a road just because I've been saying, hey, avoid him, and I don't want to be wrong? I have too much invested, too many hours of content, too many times I've told somebody stay away from Cam heading into 2022 because he's coming back too early from his injury. Am I continuing down a road I don't need to go down because of stubbornness and because I want to be right, and we want to break that one down. And also Ceedee Lamb, who is getting a lot of hate right now in fantasy football. We'll go over all of that and more. Sunk cost fallacy, psychology in fantasy football, the Fantasy Football Show
begins now.
This is the Fantasy Football Show with your host, Smitty. Take a lap.
Before we get into it, make sure you get on over to sleeperu.com, get your lifetime membership, never pay for content again, and get my one-on-one text device where if you buy the top level lifetime membership, you get text device with me,
Smitty,
your man, your go-to guy. You get it for 2 years, so go check it out at sleeperu.com. Link in the description. So, sunk cost fallacy, let's dig into a couple of these players now. And first, before you say, well, what makes you, check that, what makes you an expert in psychology in fantasy football, Smitty? Well, I do have a degree in psychology, and that makes me qualified to dabble. So let's get into it. Let's start off with Cam Akers, and this is a tough one because I've been ultra critical about Cam Akers coming back early from this Achilles tear. Now, how much of my doubt on him, how much am I saying, be careful, how much of that is sunk cost fallacy? Because I've created a lot of content on it. Hey, he's rushing back. Hey, this is not a good idea. Hey, he comes back in the wild card game, looks pretty quick, looks very explosive, looks like the job is probably going to be his walking into maybe next week in the divisional game and probably for 2022 if he can stay healthy. Now, I'm going to shock you a little bit, and I think also not shock you in kind of going down the middle on this one, because I can admit that he looks far too good than he should coming back from that Achilles injury. What I've said is true. There has never been a running back, not a basketball player, not a defensive back. Don't throw those in the comments. Like,
what about Kevin Durant, Smitty?
What about a quarterback that I speak of? What about Adrian Peterson? That was an ACL tear, not an Achilles. So there has never been a running back that is returned to or played at an elite level, talking top 10 running back production, fantasy and NFL, after an Achilles tendon tear. Now, I've made it abundantly clear that we don't have a whole lot of data to go on because most players that tear their Achilles tendon are older, and a couple things happen. Number one, they're not young. It's hard to recover from an Achilles tear, period. And whenever example we have is an older running back or a not elite running back, we don't have a lot of data. So I've said this before, even when I'm critical, that there is a shot that Cam returns to a top 10 running back level coming off an Achilles tear where running backs don't do it. And running backs are different. I don't want to hear, again, quarterback, basketball player. Your Achilles tendon is on the lower part of the calf going into the heel area. And it's used for explosion, and when you tear it, you don't have that explosion. And you oftentimes have all kinds of other leg injuries coming off an Achilles tear, especially a running back, because you take so many different hits as a running back. You're cutting left and right constantly with 300-pound linemen driving you into the ground. You're getting hit unexpectedly when you're going one direction and someone hits you and you're planning and causing so much force on that Achilles tendon. It's different than a wide receiver or quarterback. You're taking so much force, multiple 300-pound linemen jumping on your back. Every play, people are trying to ruin you. It's very different on that Achilles tendon for a running back than it is a basketball player, a quarterback, a wide receiver. This is why we haven't really seen a running back return to top 10 running back form or ever become anything extra significant after an Achilles tear. Marlon Mack, Deonta Foreman's been looking pretty decent lately, right? But it took him forever. Like, we can't use Deonta Foreman because A, he's not holding on to any kind of job. He did it in a very short window of time. He looked pretty good. That's the best example we have, really. But again, everybody is usually older, and we've never really had an elite running back, like a top 5 to 10 guy, tear it at a young age where we can be like, okay, let's see what happens. So all of that was going for Cam, and I've said that before, even in my critical videos of Cam rushing back. The other negative for a player is when the job opening is no longer there for you. If you tear your Achilles tendon, you're Marlon Mack, your job's not really waiting for you. You're older and you had an Achilles tear. Takes more than a year to come back usually. Cam's trying to redefine that, and it's still TBA whether it works out. We've seen him a very short period of time. He's looked great, but the job opening usually isn't there. So to say you never get your job back, you never return to form, there's a little bit of a problem with that hypothesis, because if the job opening is not there, how do we know if the running back would ever return to form? How do we know that Marlon Mack wouldn't have become a top 10 running back? His job wasn't there. He didn't have a starting job waiting for him. So Cam has that going for him. Cam is young. There's a lot of things here at play that have never been at play before when looking at a case study, Achilles injury, recovery, and return or rise to top 5 to 10 running back numbers. I've made all that clear before, so that's not new information that I'm stumbling upon, but I want to start with that and tell you, hey, I've talked about that. These are the pros. The problem is he walked into 2021 as an identified injury risk for me, dating back to college and how he uses his head. He leads with his head, like every time he tries to make contact with a linebacker or any opposing defensive player. And so he's got a little bit of that reckless, like, I don't care about my body, I'm getting every extra yard, which we commend and we respect because the guy gives 120%. I'm not trying to knock him on that, but it does lead to injury. This is why Barkley is such a big injury risk. He gives it 150% every time he touches the ball. George Kittle, 200% every time he touches the ball. He wants to get an extra inch and he'll hang himself up. 2 to 3 defenders are holding on to him and people are just trying to level the guy, ruin the guy, and he's trying to just stay in play for an extra yard. And these things can lead to injury. Leading with your head can lead to injury. That's why Cam walked into 2021 as a big injury risk for me. And then you have the fact that he's rushing back, and he is rushing back, whether you want to support him or not. He is rushing back from this Achilles injury. There really wasn't a need to try and get back within 6 months. Like in the 5-month range, he's trying to return. And he comes back within the 6th month of the Achilles tear, which is reckless. I don't care if it's working right now. It is reckless. He is running a high risk of re-injury right now by being on the field. Even if he looks good, even if he escapes injury, the Rams could get bounced from this next game. They also could go forward. They're pretty dangerous right now. But the Rams could get bounced from the next game and then he escapes without being hurt because it's only been 2 games, right? Really, at that point, a little bit the game prior, but it'll be 2 games essentially that he's played. And if they get bounced from the divisional round, the Rams, then he might escape without any harm, no foul, goes into the offseason, keeps training well, not taking in-game hits and cutting in ways you can't practice or replicate in rehab or in practice. But he's running a risk right now of getting hurt. No question about it. If Cam can get through the divisional game and whatever remaining playoff games the Rams may or may not play, and he can enter the offseason without any kind of injury trying this out, rushing it, then he's got a lot of upside. And I will admit that he probably looks like he's more on track to impress than to disappoint. And my sunk cost fallacy dilemma here is whether I keep beating a dead horse on he's rushing it and injuries very, very likely. Even in the offseason, he came back too early. There are statistics that say another leg injury is very likely coming off the Achilles. The compensation, you treat it like a car alignment. When the alignment's not quite right, other problems can happen and occur. And the dude's going full go right now in the 6th month of recovery, which is crazy. Sometimes it takes players a year. Every player is different. I get that. But it's not like 6 months in 1 year. It's not like we're talking about 1 month where some people respond quicker. This is like double the time. Now, surgeries and medicine, everything's advancing quickly. And some of that could be at play here that's not being explained to us right now. I'm trying to take all that into account. I'm trying to take into account that he looked great. And part of my argument against Achilles injuries is that people never return to form. He does look like he's back to form. If he can stay healthy, he's back to form. He looks quick and explosive. So already, one of the things we had going against him, he's already proven to conquer, which is that you can't return to form off an Achilles injury. According to the data, according to history, he looks to form. So right there, advantage. I'm going to leave you with this. There is a possibility that I am a little biased against Cam Akers because of sunk cost fallacy, because I've created a lot of content on it, and because I do have a pretty darn good grasp on fantasy football injuries. I've been doing this from an analyst perspective professionally, not as a side business, not as a self-proclaimed Instagram expert that's had my page up for a year going,
I'm an expert.
I proclaim it. Look, I've been on CBS and NBC Sports Radio. I was on the longest running fantasy football radio show in the world, dropping predictions, doing scouting. I've been doing that for 20 plus years. I do know what I'm talking about, but I also know that I'm human. And I firmly believe I do have a little bit of a sunk cost fallacy going on here, because I've never in my 20 years seen a player come back from this injury at the running back position, or a player ever having an Achilles tear and rising to a top 5 to 10 running back level. But I'm also smart enough to know, I think, that a lot of things and factors have never been in play for other players that we're using as examples. We've never seen somebody this young with a job opening available that does physically look back to form come back. I just wish he would take his time. There's no reason to rush back in this playoff game. He is 100% running the risk of tearing the Achilles tendon again, or causing some other very serious leg injury due to compensation. You can't fully test your Achilles tendon, and if it's ready, and he's so early. He is so early. This is not like he's pushing it a little bit. He's literally trying to do this 6 months out. Even though I'm becoming more supportive of the Cam Akers movement for 2022, I'm just saying I wish he would take it slow. There's no need to do it in this playoff. He can do it 2 or 3 months from now in a still accelerated Achilles tendon time frame recovery process. 8 months would be really early. He's doing it in 5 to 6. I just wish he'd take his time. I just feel like he's upping the risk of getting hurt significantly. That's all I'm trying to say. And to end, I'll say that, do I like Cam Akers at second round value? Not yet. I support the movement. I support being excited about this guy. And I'm rooting for him. I'm cheering for him. And I'm admitting that I have some sunk cost fallacy going on here. I still feel like the rushing of the process makes him a guy I want as a third drafted player or later. Don't overinvest and get too excited about talent. And the talent is there. I'm admitting it. Even after the Achilles tear, he's proving to be the one guy so far that we've ever seen that the talent can still be there. I admit, I see it. It's there. But the risk is still there if you're talking second drafted player, second round value, top 5 running back in dynasty value. It's too costly until we see him escape injury coming back from the Achilles tear 6 months too early. And I'll even amend what I just said, and I'll say he's safer as a 4th drafted player. I don't know that he's going to fall that far come June, July, and August. His hype is only going to climb, especially if he does well in the next divisional game. He's a much safer 4th drafted player. And I don't know that I can fully Smitty approve a 3rd round pick yet. Maybe I get there, especially if he escapes injury in the playoffs here, goes into a normal time frame and rehab process. Like he's going to still work hard. He's still going full go running, but at least he won't be taking hits at 6 months out. That's my problem here. My problem is he's going onto the field, creating impact you can't replicate in practice and in rehab, like I mentioned earlier. These are very dangerous explosions and pressures and situations he's putting his Achilles tendon in that can't possibly be 100% out of the woods in terms of a re-injury. So if he gets out of the playoffs, fine. If he walks into the offseason unaffected by the early comeback, I'm more inching toward 3rd round value, but I'm still holding strong on 4th with an open mind and an admission that we're finally seeing the first ever case of a guy being explosive and looking like an elite player after an Achilles tear. There's always going to be somebody pushing the limits of something. I'm still worried though, and I can only stress caution because he already felt like an injury risk, which a lot of people are going to push back on and say you can't call him an injury risk. He didn't get hurt all that much in college. But again, there's more to it when you evaluate a player's potential risk than just looking at only history. Like Mike Evans is hurt way more than he's actually missing games. You have to take into account all of that. And when you look at his style of play, he's really reckless with his body. And coming back, trying to come back 5 months into recovery, and coming back 6 months in proves he's reckless with his own body. I mean, he made the argument for me. He's very, very much, I'll put everything on the line no matter what it costs me. That's my breakdown, my honest look in the mirror in trying to identify a player I am maybe showing signs of
Sunk cost fallacy.
and that's real talk. And you don't want an analyst that isn't gonna change his mind. I got a bunch of DMs and comments yesterday when I drafted Swift in our mock drafting session yesterday. Oh, ha, 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 Smitty, insert laughing emojis. Oh, you hated Swift last year. What kind of person do you want to follow? A guy that's not going to change directions from one season to the next? So many factors have changed between last year and this year. 1 year doesn't always relate to the next year. You had the Lions coaching staff adamant about a running back by committee, not only in week 1, but through a big part of the season. There was a lot of reason to be worried about Swift. He did get banged up. I was worried about injury. And you know me, when it comes to multiple red flags, you got injury risk, and he is an injury risk. You've got situational risk. The offensive coordinator and head coach both said that Jamal Williams was their 1A and Swift was their 1B back. They said it all offseason, and they proved it for a big chunk of the year. So to be like, why do you like Swift this year? You can't because you didn't like him last year. I'm not the analyst for you. If you really think I'm going to take one season and make all my decisions based on what I felt that year with that information, things change. I can only laugh when I see those comments and say, you don't watch my show, do you? So for anybody that thinks, oh, hilarious, he likes Cam Akers more today than he did yesterday, you don't want to follow somebody that can't adjust and adapt themselves. You don't want to follow somebody's content that looks at a spreadsheet in the preseason and then in week 8 they're saying the same thing. Well, my spreadsheet says that he's supposed to score 8 touchdowns. I don't know what's going on here. You really want to follow somebody that doesn't adjust and adapt? So Akers, I'm more on board than I was weeks ago, months ago, but I've explained my concern, which is still very much in play. But he is the most likely candidate of sunk cost fallacy for me. And I thought I'd have real talk with you. Next player. Now it's time to talk about
CeeDee Lamb.
A lot of people are going to cast a lot of shade on CeeDee Lamb walking into 2022. And I understand why. Lamb didn't have the year we wanted him to have. We wanted him to be a top 1 to 5 wide receiver. But he didn't drop awful numbers. He didn't bust. Darren Waller busted. Christian McCaffrey busted. And you can argue injury. Oh, you can't bust if you get hurt. I disagree. You can define bust however you want. As I talk about all the time, busting to me is not delivering, crapping the bed, making me lose my season. You bust whether you get hurt or not, and Lamb didn't bust on you. Lamb dropped about 80 receptions, 1,100 yards, and 6 touchdowns. Not horrible. That's wide receiver 2 material. Like, he didn't deliver what we wanted him to deliver, clearly. Disappointed, guilty of disappointing, no question about it. But if you watch football, if you watch all of Lamb's plays, you know he's still an alpha. The most common thing I see in a comment is he's not a wide receiver 1. He's not the alpha.
He's trash.
All he's ever going to be is a wide receiver 2. There are reasons to worry that could come true, but they're based on coaching. They're based on Dak. Now, because we don't know if things are going to change in 2022, we don't know if they're going to utilize CeeDee Lamb to his potential, maximize the potential this guy has, get the most out of him. Because we don't know if anything's going to change, he would be risky at last year's ADP. Last year, CeeDee Lamb had an ADP right around this 2-3 turn. This is where CeeDee Lamb lived. You either took him at the very end of round 2 or you got him in 3 and you counted your lucky stars because we thought, oh my God, this guy's going to blow up. This guy's going to be insane. This guy's going to be the next top 5 wide receiver. Clearly, he didn't drop that good of a season. He dropped a good season, but not that good of a season. And so he disappointed you from this ADP. Well, I've got news for you because in 2022, CeeDee Lamb's ADP is coming in right around this 4-5 turn. You're talking about a 2-round difference, 2 rounds apart from last year's ADP and this year's ADP. That is fantastic. That bakes in every single little bit of risk into the equation.
Baked in, boys!
And let's say that's wrong. Let's say we don't get that lucky. He doesn't fall to the 4.5 turn. He falls to like 4.3 or 4.4. Still a value. Everything I say today applies still. Maybe to a tiny lesser degree because you're getting him a little bit at a more expensive value. But I'm not worried at all about CeeDee Lamb as my 4th drafted player. And he's not going to go higher than that in general, even if some people still love him, because he went in the 3rd round last year and disappointed, and everybody's saying he's trash, he's this, he's that. There's no way he's falling like a few spots and still going in the same round. He's going in round 4, maybe the 4.5 turn, maybe it's 4.5, doesn't matter. We'll talk about it at 4.5, that turn. That's where we'll define it for right now. But if it does climb, know that I'm okay with 4.3, 4.5, 4th drafted player material is gold, in my opinion, given what I'm going to lay out right now. So when you get people that say, oh, Smitty, I just don't know that he's going to become that guy.
You're not that guy, pal. You're not that guy.
When people say that, I laugh because what you're buying him at is not that guy. You're buying CeeDee Lamb at a value that's going to earn you what? It's going to earn you these numbers right here. If he disappoints and gets those numbers, he earns his value here. It's completely baked in. Fantasy owners aren't going to adjust and adapt to his ADP. This is like when Dalvin Cook, when I first launched my channel, in the intro, top 5 running back. Cook was number 3 or 4 overall. And when he tore his ACL, came back and busted the next year with lingering injuries relating to the ACL recovery, because ACLs typically take more than 1 year to recover. The main reason we didn't like Barkley walking into 2021. And another reason I'm not on the Godwin train, people need to relax on Godwin walking into 2022, coming off an ACL tear. But Dalvin Cook was a top 5 guy before the injuries. And what did everybody say walking into his breakout year? Smitty, I don't think Dalvin Cook's worth taking in the top 5. Bob, he's not going in the top 5. Bob, he's going in the 2-3 turn range. That's where Dalvin Cook was going his breakout year. But yet everybody kept talking and referencing the top 5 value. He's not worth the top 5 value, Smitty. I just don't like it when Dalvin Cook was going in the 2-3 turn. Same thing here. Lamb was going at the 2-3 turn. He's not worth a top 5 wide receiver pick, Smitty. I just don't see it happening this year. You don't have to worry about that because he's going at the 4-5 turn in 2022. That's where his value looks to be hiding. Everything's baked in. You take a frog, you throw him in boiling water, he jumps out. You take a frog, you put him in lukewarm water, turn it on high, he slowly boils to death. It doesn't jump out of the pot because it's subtle. It happens subtly, and he doesn't realize he's burning to death, and then he dies. It's a frog analogy, people. Relax, okay? I'm not saying it'll actually happen. That's an analogy. But I think people with ADP, they boil to death because they don't adjust to the slowly evolving ADP, or unraveling, or dropping, or falling in ADP. So Lamb, he's a bust. Okay, well, he's dropping into the late 3rd round. He's a bust. He's dropping into the top of the 4th round. He's a bust. Now he's at the 4-5 turn, and you're still saying he's a bust. Adjust and adapt. Don't reverse sunk cost fallacy this bad boy. I'm going to keep saying no because I've been saying no. People are going to pile on the negativity, the doubt. So the question is, am I throwing good after bad? Am I trying to double down because I've talked so much about CeeDee Lamb? Here's where I told you it gets complicated. You need to know when you're reaching and when you're not. You need to know when you're not acknowledging that you're biased against somebody. I'm continually trying to pump up CeeDee Lamb because I've just created too much content about him, and I can't be wrong. I can't be made to look a fool, so I'm going to double down again. Even though in my heart he's not going to do well, I don't feel that way about CeeDee Lamb. With Akers, I give you my honest approach. I'm mixed. I kind of feel like maybe I need to give him more of a chance, but I do tell you, I don't like how he's rushing it. It does zero good for his 2022 value to be rushing, or his future value, or potential ability to stave off injuries. He's running a high risk of getting hurt again, but the talent looks there. I've admitted it. Sunk cost fallacy may be in play for Akers for me, but I'm telling you right now, I've evaluated this situation. I am not victim of sunk cost fallacy when it comes to CeeDee Lamb. This is not me throwing more good after bad. This is not me digging my heels in and creating a bigger problem for myself and my content because I don't want to let go of an earlier prediction. This is not that case. This is not sunk cost fallacy for me. It's like the reverse for everybody continuing to pile on and not adjusting and adapting to his ADP, which is falling into a very ridiculously good and low risk situation. Sunk cost fallacy exists, but it doesn't exist here. And determining when it does and when it doesn't exist is going to be the challenge that we all face walking into the coming weeks and months as we train and try and get better at psychology and fantasy football and learning where we need to improve and where we might have bias holding us back in our evaluation process. So CeeDee Lamb, I'm telling you people, if you watch his games, if you watch football at all, if you don't just, maybe you're watching the red zone and you're flipping back and forth and it's not your fault. But if you're watching this man play, you know that he's one of the most dangerous players in the NFL when in the slot. You know that the Cowboys didn't use him against the Niners at all. It wasn't CeeDee Lamb's fault that he didn't do anything in that playoff game against the Niners. The Cowboys misused him. We're worried about that continuing, which is why we have doubt, which is why his ADP has rightfully so fallen into the 4th round, maybe 4 or 5 turn range. Acceptable, understandable, and appropriate. But with that, you have to adapt your thinking and acknowledge that this man right here possesses top 5 wide receiver skills. He does. If you don't think that, you aren't watching all of his film. This guy's an alpha. He's not a wide receiver 2. He's entering his 3rd year. Sometimes wide receivers take a full 3 years to explode. Not everybody's Jamar Chase. Not everybody's Justin Jefferson. It doesn't mean that the 3rd year breakout can't eventually be as good as the guy that can do it in year 1. Situations matter. Dak's been looking like garbage. We're worried about that continuing, but Dak's the problem. McCarthy's the problem. Getting CeeDee Lamb the football will be the objective, has to be the objective for 2022. Walking into it, trying to solve these problems, realizing that when in the slot, he burns everybody. When moving him around the field, like Debo, getting him involved all over the field, he becomes a weapon. He's an alpha weapon. He's a wide receiver 1. If you watch his film, you understand he's only going to get better. He's untapped in terms of some of his talents and skills. He will only get better. And if they utilize him properly, he's going to explode and absolutely crush his 4-5 turn, 4 to 5 round range ADP. And if he doesn't, if things don't improve, Dak continues to not utilize Lamb, McCarthy stays and continues to not utilize Lamb, he doesn't move around all over the field, he's not in the slot a lot where he dominates. If nothing changes, he still earns you 80 receptions, probably 11 to 1,200 yards, and you got to think 7 to 8 touchdowns. He'll improve marginally, even if things don't improve around him. Even if his situation remains crap, he will get you 1,100 to 1,200 yards, 80 receptions, and 6 to 8 touchdowns. That's your worst case scenario, and you're worried about that at 4 or 5 round turn range because everybody else is saying it. This is not sunk cost fallacy, people. I've had a lot of fun with this episode, and we're going to continue to dive into psychology and fantasy football. Below, drop your potential sunk cost fallacy vulnerability, if you will. What player might you be falling victim to this? What player do you have a bias against that you really need to self-reflect and try and overcome? Drop it below. Be honest. Exciting news. I created a clips channel for the Fantasy Football Show, which will be cut up versions of individual player breakdowns. So if I talk about Waller for 5 minutes, I'm going to cut that up, put it on the clips channel, and it'll be easy to find different content about one player at a time. We do long form content here on the Fantasy Football Show, hour show, 2 hour show, 3 hour show. Not everybody gets to watch every minute of every show. And then you miss a whole segment on McCaffrey or on Akers or on whatever. This clips channel will be amazing because it's going to help you find and navigate your way into one player conversation. And I need your help. Go subscribe to the new channel. Link in the description, and I pinned it in the chat, and I'll also pin it in the first comment of the video once this premiere ends. But sub up. You're going to want to be a part of that channel too. It's an extension of this channel. It's not going to take away from this at all, but it's going to be a way to amplify what we're doing here over there. And get on over to sleeperu.com right here. Get your lifetime membership. Get your 2 years of free text advice if you get the highest level lifetime membership, limited time. Go get it. Let's tear up 2022. I appreciate you all being here for the live premieres on Fridays. I really enjoy doing the live show Monday through Thursday, occasional lives on Friday too. It's not always going to be a live premiere, but I do love doing this long form premiere for you. I'm live in the chat as we watch it live together, and I think it's a great way to do some learning. We'll make Fridays kind of like a learning environment like this. Appreciate you. Subscribe if you're new. Buckle up. Subscribe to the new channel. Link in the description. Let's tear up 2022.
This is the Fantasy Football Show with your host, Smitty.